You don't feel broke when you're spending. You feel broke in the quiet moments after, when nothing is wrong, yet something feels tight. At some point, usually without warning, you notice that even with a plan, even with discipline, money still feels like it's standing between you and your life. That's when a strange question appears, one most people never stop to ask: why frugal living creates more freedom than budgeting, even though budgeting is supposed to be the responsible choice. You followed the rules. You tracked. You adjusted. And still, your choices feel smaller than they should. Here's the part no one says out loud. Budgeting is about permission. Frugal living is about power. One asks you to manage limits. The other quietly removes them. This isn't a video about saving more money. It's about why control over money doesn't feel like freedom until you change the way you think about it. No one tells you this at the beginning. Budgeting doesn't fail because you're bad with money. It fails because it asks you to live your life inside a system that was never designed for how humans actually behave. On paper, everything looks reasonable. Categories, limits, percentages. In real life, it feels like every decision needs permission. You don't notice it at first. You feel responsible, in control. But slowly, money stops being a tool and starts feeling like a referee. Every choice gets judged. Every small joy needs justification. Even when you win the month, you feel tired instead of free. This pressure feels heavier now than it did a few years ago. Prices move faster than plans. Your budget becomes outdated before you finish adjusting it. You're not reckless. You're reacting to a world where stability keeps shifting. Yet the rules stay rigid. Here's the quiet truth most advice skips. Budgeting focuses on restricting behavior after desire already exists. It waits until the moment of temptation, then asks you to resist. That's not freedom. That's constant negotiation. You start living for the next reset, next paycheck, next month. And without realizing it, you're not designing a life. You're managing a cage with nicer labels. That's the problem no one names. Before budgeting became personal, it wasn't personal at all. Early budgets were built for governments, armies, and large households with predictable rhythms. The goal wasn't freedom. It was survival and coordination. Money moved slowly. Lives were simpler. Needs were fewer, and wants weren't constantly manufactured. When budgeting entered everyday life, it came with the same rigid thinking: plan everything in advance, control every outcome. But the world changed faster than the system. Spending became emotional, instant, and deeply tied to identity. Yet the tools stayed mechanical. What's rarely mentioned is that most financial freedom stories from the past didn't start with perfect budgets. They started with fewer obligations, smaller lifestyles. Quiet choices to opt out before money was even part of the equation. Budgeting was never meant to create peace. It was meant to track resources. Somewhere along the way, we confused accounting with autonomy and wondered why the numbers added up, but life didn't feel lighter. In essence, freedom isn't about numbers. Here's the shift that changes everything. Freedom with money doesn't come from knowing where every dollar goes. It comes from reducing how many places it needs to go at all. Numbers don't create calm. Decisions do. And fewer decisions create more space. When you live frugally, something subtle happens. You stop asking, "Can I afford this?" and start asking, "Do I want to need this?" That question moves power away from spreadsheets and back to you. Budgeting reacts to life. Frugal living redesigns it. Instead of wrestling with limits at the point of purchase, frugality removes the struggle upstream. Fewer subscriptions, fewer status-driven upgrades, fewer automatic yes. Not because you're denying yourself, but because you're protecting your attention and time. This is why frugal living feels freer, even when it looks stricter from the outside. You're not chasing flexibility through money. You're creating it through simplicity. And once you experience that shift, the math stops being the main character. You become it. That's the hidden truth most advice never explains. There's usually a moment when the system cracks. Not a crisis. Not a dramatic failure. Just a quiet realization that something isn't working, even though it looks like it should. In this case, it happens after months of doing everything right. Bills paid on time. Spending tracked. No big mistakes. Yet the feeling underneath doesn't change. The turning point doesn't come from a big financial decision. It comes from a small one. Skipping an upgrade that was automatic before. Choosing a slower option instead of the convenient one. Not to save money, but to see what happens. At first, it feels uncomfortable, like you're falling behind some invisible standard. But then something unexpected shows up.
Time.
Less rushing. Fewer justifications. You stop explaining your choices to yourself. Soon, money stops being the center of every decision. You're not calculating categories in your head anymore. You're noticing how often spending was really about relief, not need. Once you see that, the pressure loosens. The surprise isn't that you spend less. It's that you think less about money altogether. The noise fades. The anxiety softens. And for the first time in a long while, your life feels slightly bigger, even though it costs less to run. That's the moment people rarely talk about. The moment freedom begins quietly. The new definition of frugality. Not cheap, but free. Frugality has a branding problem. Most people picture sacrifice, restriction, or a life permanently stuck on pause. But modern frugality isn't about saying no to everything. It's about saying no to what quietly taxes your peace. Being frugal today means choosing alignment over appearance. It means spending on what actually supports your life and cutting what only props up an image. Not because you have to, but because you finally see the trade. This version of frugality doesn't feel heavy. It feels clean. Fewer defaults. Fewer habits you never questioned. Fewer purchases that ask for your attention long after the money is gone. What looks like less from the outside often feels like expansion on the inside. More margin. More options. More room to respond when life changes. That's why frugality creates freedom. It lowers the volume of financial demand. It shrinks the lifestyle that needs constant funding. And in doing so, it gives you back something budgeting never promised: space. Not cheap. Not extreme. Just free enough to breathe again. So, why does frugality works when budgets break? Budgets ask you to be disciplined every single day. That sounds reasonable until you remember how real life works. Energy fluctuates. Emotions leak into decisions. Unexpected moments don't check your categories before showing up. Budgeting assumes consistency from humans living in an inconsistent world. Frugality works differently. Instead of relying on constant restraint, it changes the environment around your choices. Fewer temptations enter your life in the first place. Fewer defaults pull at you quietly. You're not winning battles, you're avoiding them altogether. This is why frugality holds up when budgets start to crack. It's built on behavior, not willpower. When your lifestyle costs less to maintain, mistakes don't feel like disasters. They feel recoverable. There's also a psychological shift. You stop seeing money as something to manage tightly and start seeing it as something to protect loosely. That reduces fear. And fear is what makes people abandon budgets in the first place. When life speeds up, frugality slows things down. It absorbs shock instead of amplifying it. And that's why, in unstable times, simple living outperforms perfect planning. Not because it's smarter on paper, but because it works in real life. Freedom doesn't arrive with a number. It doesn't announce itself when you hit a target or close a month under budget. It shows up in smaller ways. You notice it when a price increase doesn't shake you. When you say no without guilt. When your choices don't feel fragile. This is the reveal most people miss. Financial freedom isn't about having more money than you need. It's about needing less than you have. Frugal living creates that gap. A soft buffer between you and stress. A margin that doesn't depend on perfect behavior. That's why it feels different. The calm doesn't come from control. It comes from resilience. And resilience grows quietly, while no one is watching. By the time you notice it, freedom is already there, working in the background, holding your life open instead of closed. That's the shift. So, here's the question worth sitting with. What if the life you want doesn't require more effort? Just fewer obligations? What if freedom isn't something you earn later, but something you create now by choosing differently? You don't need to be perfect with money. You need room to move, room to breathe, room to decide without fear pressing in. Frugal living isn't about shrinking your life. It's about clearing space so it can finally expand. When you stop financing things that don't serve you, you start investing in yourself without even trying. And that's when money stops leading your life and quietly steps aside. Now, if you want to learn how to achieve financial success, then watch this video next. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this. Drop a comment and tell me,